Hello, this is Beyond the Binary on 91.1 FM WDBX Radio in Southern Illinois. So, hello, Austin. I had read your zine, and I really, really appreciated you giving me the zine and allowing me to read it. Well, I'm a huge zine reader, and every time I get one, I consider it just like a special gift. I love reading them. Could you talk a bit about who you are and introduce yourself for a moment?
Hi, my name is Austin. I'm 31. I live in Tennessee. I identify as transgendered, and I was male assigned at birth. I really like zines, too. Zine writing and reading has been a huge part of my queer identity and my young punk identity. But when I was around 20 years old, I started to transition from male to female, and then around 26, I started to detransition. And then last summer, I started writing a zine about it called Picking Up the Pieces. And it's kind of a narrative about my entire life experience, I guess.
Definitely. So when did you actually plan to create the zine? Like, when did the idea spark for you?
It sort of was sparked by my disappointment in the Internet. Like, when I was younger, around 26, and thinking about detransitioning or, like, actively seeking out information on that online, I only found a couple of things, and they were really, like, sensational tabloidy type things. So I was really frustrated, and then I sort of like, a couple years went by, and then last summer I, just decided that it was time for me to sit down and write this. And I'd been thinking about it for a really long time, and always finding like reasons not to do it, always finding things to be too busy to actually sit down. And I finally just forced myself last summer to take a couple afternoons while I was working on an organic farm and just sit down and type this thing out. I got a typewriter at a thrift store. I bought a ream of paper, and I set to it.
Oh, wow, that's really, really cool. It's interesting how zines travel because I didn't realize it, but I had retrieved your zine from someone else a long time ago, and I just never had the chance to read it, and then you handed it to me, and there it was again, and I didn't realize that I had gotten it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's interesting how zines actually travel in the queer community. So anyway, I just wanted to say, you did say your zine was a kind of a personal trans narrative of sorts, but would you say it's mostly that, or about you in general, or is it both of these things?
Well, it definitely deals with pretty much my entire life. I talk a lot about some childhood trauma of my mom and my brother and I being in a really terrible car accident, and my mom dying, and my dad sort of not being around and being raised by my grandparents, and some other stuff that I meant to put in there, but to time constraints, just I actually had to not go down certain paths. But it was important for me to talk about some things that have happened in the past with my dying and an insurance settlement and a few other things. I wanted to make the air really clear about some stuff because there were some rumors about things that were, kind of true but not quite 100% accurate. So I just sort of wanted to dispel the myth of money and transition and my life and just sort of put, my own experience out there. And I feel like so much of my experience in my life has been me stifling myself from really talking about who I am and where I come from and things that shaped my adulthood by things that happened to me when I was younger. And I just felt like it was time for me to sit down and do it.
Wow, and you really, you made this public in some way. So I really like how your zine is imperfect. It has spelling errors. You kind of make that clear in the beginning. I found that to be a really authentic way to write your zine. Did you want to elaborate on your reaction to this, people's reaction to it being kind of imperfect in that way? Does it make your story more or less authentic, do you think? Would you have changed anything, too? Would you have gone back and edited anything? Is there a certain quality of consciousness that's present in your zine? I know I'm saying that here, but I guess what I mostly want to ask is, do you have any regrets with it being sort of imperfect, or do you like that sort of authenticity it adds to it?
Well, I'm kind of a perfectionist in a lot of things. I'm a little bit anal retentive about stuff, and that was one of the major reasons why I never sat down and took the time to sit down and write it. And a lot of times when I write, it's scribbles and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. my bedroom is filled with like hundreds of paper everywhere that don't really make any sense to anyone but me. And I always use like that as an excuse not to write it, or like I'm a terrible speller and I have no idea how punctuation works, or like what a semicolon does, or anything like that. I mean, I'm really smart in some things, but I just don't have grammar and things like that down pat. And I wanted to be like perfectly honest with people about that in the front, because I feel like if I were to spend time trying to edit it and make it grammatically correct and things like that, it would lose all of its authenticity. Like it would be like me rearranging it. So, part of like my writing experience in life has been journaling, and I used to be like an avid journaler. And I just actually went through some of my things and saw some of those old journals, which was really crazy, but that's a detour. A couple years ago, I stopped journaling because I was in this really like depressive place, and my journal entries were always basically like, whatever the day is, this is terrible. I'm so miserable. I don't want to leave the house. And then eventually I just like stopped writing altogether because I found my entries were pretty similar. But I did have some pen pals that I was like writing letters to, and I felt like this shift with writing instead of journaling. I just started writing a lot of letters and sending them out to people, and then getting responses, and like sometimes just with some of my pen pals, like having people write me letters back that have nothing to do with what I wrote them. It's just like them completely dishing and getting their stuff out there so that they can get it off their chest too. And it was this really productive way of pen paling, I think.
I like how you call it productive, because it definitely is in that sort of stream of consciousness kind of way. So you make yourself really vulnerable in this zine, like talking about your childhood and really intense stuff that happened. Do you think talking about such private details in your life and your transition kind of helps you process information? Do you think zines are supposed to be vulnerable? Is that really like a productive thing? Are zines supposed to be like that?
I think so, yeah. If you want something that's all cleaned and polished and sterile, like go get a self-help book. But if you want something that's real and probably, most likely by someone in your peer group, someone that's like experiencing very similar things but maybe experiencing them slightly differently, when you read something like that, by someone that's similar to you, it just feels more real. There's a couple of zines that I have that I absolutely have cherished, and over time have lent them out, and I still have some on a shelf. But I just feel like it's really important to speak from the heart when you're writing a zine. And I don't like being vulnerable, but I feel like it was important for me to make myself really vulnerable, and that's been really difficult. Like, writing the zine was one thing because, like it started out kind of like an open letter to the world, and then like sort of 3 pages into it turned into this like really heavy processing session that I had like specifically one person, but not one specific person. Like an open letter, I wanted it to be like a direct letter to the person that was reading it, so that they would feel like they were having a conversation with me. And
exactly.
And I feel like that worked out really well, because most of the positive feedback I've gotten about the zine were how, I sat down and read it completely through in like one sitting, and it just felt like I was sitting on the couch talking to you. And that makes me feel really good, and that makes me want to write another one.
What was the purpose of the trigger warning on the cover of the zine?
Well, I feel like, triggers are really touchy for people, and I'm like triggered by a lot of things, and even just writing about my mom's death and some things that happened to me in my life was triggering. And I felt like for other people that have experienced like the death of a parent or suicidal thoughts, I felt like it was important to let them know that when they the zine, it wasn't all going to be like a harmony joyride.
What's interesting is that this like zine culture seems to pay attention a lot to those sort of things. Like I think it's like, I found that to be a really considerate thing to read on the cover of your zine. And it's not a privilege that we see like on the covers of books and stuff, or novels that can be really hardcore.
I know.
it's almost like in some instances, I'd like to judge a book by its cover, so I know what I'm getting myself into. So I found that to be really refreshing to see that trigger warning. And thank you for elaborating. So how have people in general reacted to your zine?
Well, it's been actually, pretty amazing. I've like sort of published it in 3 printings, and the first one I sent out to like 40 people, and I got maybe 3 responses. But they were all, like either postcard or letter or one like really amazing email. And that was really good to hear from people, and it was really overwhelming at first. And then that was pretty much it for a while. And then like the second printing, I decided that I was going to just hand deliver them to people instead of like mailing them, because like things get lost in the mail, and get something in the mail and it's not really, it's just like this, it's just a zine. It's in a manila envelope. It's boring. But I thought by delivering them to people, and specifically I wanted to deliver them to really amazing trans women that I meet in the queer community that I feel like I want to have a better community with, and I want to talk about things that, I feel like throughout my life I haven't really been able to talk about in queer spaces because that experience is totally marginalized.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask you a question about that. There is something really special about what you're saying, especially. There's a lot of trans-identified people that seem to like to forget their past selves completely. Why do you think this is? Do you think the trans community could benefit from being more in touch with themselves before transition, as you seem to be in your zine?
I think so. Yeah, I feel like most of who is to blame for trans-identified people denying their pre-transition selves is the profession. Informed consent hormone LGBT clinics giving out hormones, when you had to go through like the Harry Benjamin standards of care, like I did in 2001 to 2002. And then, onward. It was all jumping through hoops. Like, you couldn't just go and say, I'm a trans woman, I want to be on hormones. You have to do this whole, like, therapy thing. And then I had to, like, live full-time for 3 months before my endocrinologist in Atlanta would put me on estrogen, even though,
wow,
like, please just give it to me. I was like, I was like this 21-year. I don't think I could drink yet. But that was a whole different world. But also, if a psychiatrist or a therapist were to tell a non-trans patient that the way that they can, successfully live the rest of their lives by, ignoring who they are and where they came from for the first, whatever period of their life, they would probably lose their license because that's totally unhealthy and crazy. But
exactly.
For people, and specifically trans women, that has been, the norm for probably 40 to 50 years.
We definitely still have a lot of work to do. How has it been sharing your detransition story, seeing as it's really controversial? Have there been some trans people that have distanced themselves from you and that? What has it been like?
Well, that's really difficult to answer. I don't know necessarily if people, specifically other trans people, distance themselves, or if I distance myself by, being rude or kind of angry or like super judgmental of people. I think most of any separation that happened through my detransition definitely had my own fingers involved.
Right.
But ever since I wrote the zine, the response has been, totally different. Like I feel like it has brought me closer to other trans women and has helped me. It's like giving me the space to talk about things that I've always needed to talk about, and to listen and learn and find out that I'm not the only person that's ever transitioned that thought of detransitioning and then did detransition. I mean, it happens pretty often, but people just don't talk about it. And I kind of thought by writing a zine about it that I would somehow be able to build a bridge for communication. I know that sounds so cliche, but I just wanted trans women to talk about it and feel like it was okay to have those ideas because, so many times in the day, after I transitioned and was living as a trans woman full time, I just like, I would feel depressed or whatever, and then, it's always so much easier to look at the grass is greener on the other side, and I feel like for me specifically, that had a lot to do with it. Like my boy life was actually not terrible, but it wasn't great, and I just basically stopped taking estrogen, and then basically like stopped leaving the house, and then it was just all downhill from there for a while.
Well, I think you really do build that bridge, as you put it, really well. Because I myself, being a part of the trans community, I found it almost like I was kind of nervous to read it because I deal with those struggles myself, but I've never really understood how to speak about it. So I think zine creating really creates that way to connect to these controversial topics. So how do you distribute your zine out? You kind of talked about just handing it out in general to people. You found that was kind of the best route to take to kind of have that face-to-face transition? Is, no pun intended.
Definitely. I feel like handing it out face-to-face versus just sticking it in a manila envelope and mailing it out through the post office, it's like profoundly different, because if I hand a person a zine and they go home and read it, they are like 99% more likely to take 5 minutes to write me an email or send me a message on Facebook or a text or something to at least acknowledge that I gave it to them. I would say like almost all of the positive response to my zine was from people that I hand-delivered it to. And quite a bit of them did get lost in the mail due to like insufficient addresses or like incorrect names. Because like where I live in the middle of nowhere, the post office will only deliver mail to like a certain whatever names are listed at that address. So if you send, like Austin McFave, it's not going to get here. Talk to them about just delivering anything, and now they do. But it was kind of a struggle for a minute.
So that makes sense why you decided to take this, just handing it out directly. So are you transitioning again? Did you say you were transitioning again?
I feel like I'm, maybe 75% sure that I'm going to transition. I'm still like, kind of on the fence about it. I'm not trying to make any major decisions just yet until some other things in my life sort of settle down.
Do you think we can expect another zine of you kind of talking about this?
Yeah, definitely. I have my typewriter on my coffee table, and there's, that same ream of paper just waiting. And I've been writing letters, and I have an outline sort of where I want to pick up from where I got a little vague towards the end of picking up the pieces because, it was like 30-some-odd pages of zine, like zine-sized pages.
Mm-hmm.
It was becoming a little bit too much. So I sort of scaled the end of it down and decided to write a sequel to it called Picking Up Where I Left Off.
Ooh, I like that.
I know, I thought that was kind of catchy.
That is catchy. So I love, like, near the end of your zine, you go over certain flaws in the trans community when it comes to how we view the idea of transition. The whole concept of casting comes to mind, and what you have to do to get there, whether it's surgery, voice training, wearing certain clothes, hiding certain parts of your body. Did you want to elaborate sort of on these feelings that you have at the end of the zine?
I know things have changed now with the medical and the, mental health care world dealing with trans patients, but I feel like passing is such a major part of transitioning, and it's specifically, I think it's, 100 times more intense for trans women because I feel like trans women have a lot more visibility than most trans men that I know. We tend to stand out from the rest of the crowd. Passing is like how you guarantee safety when you're walking home from work in the middle of the night or on the bus. But also at the same time, like passing or not passing sort of further increases and like intensifies body dysphoria.
Exactly.
And I hate that when I was a young kid, when I was like 21 years old, I made these decisions to get all this surgery because I really did think then that if I didn't pass as a cis woman and live stealth, that I would live this like horribly shameful death and or horribly shameful life alone, kind of like I heard on the internet.
Exactly.
2002-ish. And, like the TS roadmap was pretty much the only online resource that was comprehensive and talked about a lot more than just surgery, focused on a lot of surgery. And I have some, thoughts that maybe that whole website is just a giant sales pitch to get certain plastic surgeons business.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me being kind of skeptical and slightly angry. Passing is just a really difficult thing, and, I struggled with it during my transition, in my detransition, before I transitioned. I struggled with to the Dollar General to buy ice cream. I just had like a whole experience which is not uncommon.
It really isn't, no. Do you have any advice for people wanting to make a zine?
Yeah, I would say get yourself, like a $5 ream of paper and a typewriter, and just preferably electric, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, you can computer too. If you're really proficient on your computer and you have a printer, or you can take a file to the library and make a print, that's awesome. I say just sit down and do it, and the crappier it is in terms of aesthetic and print quality, I feel like the better it's going to come across as a zine.
Exactly.
Like the only real criticism I got of my zine was that someone said I and buy a computer. And I was like, well, I have access to computers. I have a computer, but I feel like a zine, if you want to do it in the true like punk ethos, like to the nitty-gritty of a zine, it should be on a typewriter. And I actually kind of feel ashamed that my typewriter is electric. It makes it go a lot faster. Like scissors, get the scissors and the Elmer's glue out and do a lot of cutting, collage work, and, a stapler. That's when you can get all of that at, like, the library. I feel like, you can't make, you could definitely have a lot of bad content in a zine, but I don't think that you can make a bad zine if it's, like, from you and it's true to what's going on in your life.
Yeah, that kind of plays into that vulnerability that you're talking about. Do you have any advice for trans people who are too scared or ashamed to detransition?
Oh, boy, that is such a heavy question. I would say just talk about it.
Right.
Not internalize that like so many people do. Actually talk about it. I would really love, like on forums, if I could read more people talking about detransition. I also think that, I just think that it's really important for people to talk about it and not internalize it or think that, I'm not valid or I'm not worth it. This transition isn't what I thought, because, a lot of times there's so much like magical thinking involved with transitioning. And, sometimes by transitioning it'll solve some problems but create totally. And, the thought of detransition is, I feel like it's pretty common. Every trans woman I've ever talked to about it has said that it's crossed their mind once or, twice, but, and I've only met one person that detransitioned, and our experiences were totally different, and they're much happier now.
Can I say, I almost don't even like the language of detransition. I almost want to say that it's all a part of our transitioning,
I totally agree. I actually really hate the term detransition because, detransitioning in itself is another transition.
Exactly.
And I feel like it, I think that there's sort of this, foolish thought that you transition and then that's it. Like, your life goes on back to being this other thing. But you never stop transitioning. I mean, your body continues to transition, whether you're on hormones or not.
Right.
Your mental state, we're always transitioning. We're always evolving as humans. And detransition really should just have some other name, but unfortunately detransition is the one that sticks.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. That pretty much wraps this up.
Oh my God, it's totally my pleasure. I just want to say one more thing, that I'm trying to find someone who has access to a scanner or some sort of like computer savviness that I don't have because I'm pretty primitive, to help me make like a PDF file of the zine so that I can put it online so that it's available to more people. I feel like that's the only downside to zine,
Right.
that it has this great benefit that it's tangible and it's in your hand, but it makes it a little bit difficult to share. So I am going to try to get that on the interwebs in the next month.
That is a great idea. I think I may be able to connect you with some people, and I'll keep in touch with you, Austin. Thank you so much.
Cool, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.